Well, that's the end of the presentation, but it's always a good place to start at the end. There we go, look at that, like magic. I'm going to spend a bit of time today talking to you about value-based marketing, but not too much. We've been talking about that now for about 3 years and doing a lot of work internally, but I guess why we're talking about it here today and around the genetics piece. Very soon, and when I say very soon in our industry, in the next 12, 18 months, we're going to have some really good quality data we can start providing. But what are you going to do with it as producers? And the way we understand it, this genetics piece is really, really important to that. So we're participating because we want to do whatever we can to help us fix that part up so we can make real use out of genetics to improve our industry. And it's really good following on from Jason because we get a lot of questions about why we talk about this stuff. And I couldn't agree more with some of what he's just said. We sat down as a business about 5 years ago and we celebrated, we kept it really quiet, but Tees was in business for 70 years. And it was a really short celebration because we realised that there's no way we'd be in business for 70 more if we kept doing the same stuff. And we've become very good at what we call just simply selling the buy. We'd go and buy bunches of cattle and then we'd go out into the world marketplace and sell it. That sounds really good until you start to figure out you're really expensive on world terms to process cattle, and some of Australia's cattle are becoming expensive around the world too. So if you want to compete in that commodity game, well, it's kind of a game for suckers, right? And we wanted to get out of that. So we've been working really hard internally about changing that around and trying to go out and buying the sell, if you like. So we go out and sell product in the marketplace and go and buy. It sounds really simple to anyone not in the meat industry. When you start to do that though, you soon figure out that all the systems that you've had in the business for 30 or 40 years don't work so good to achieve that end. Hence the talk about value-based marketing. And Tees has been around as long as it has because it keeps reinventing itself. And we're in that process now. And so the industry is to a large degree too. We've got to get this simple message out of that commodity game because it's really good sometimes but really horrible other times, and often for producers and processors the direct opposite. So you can't build a supply chain around that. And for us really simply it's about the customer. And really I think the message for genetics too is it's got to be about the end customer because as someone in the audience keeps telling me, that's where all our money comes from. There's no money in the industry unless someone's dipped into their pocket to pay for the goods that we produce. And working then with our suppliers, we've got to send the right signals to everyone so you can produce more and more product that the customer actually wants and will pay for. And Rod gave a good example before around MSA willingness to pay. Now, we've got that issue convincing our salesmen, right, that really good product you can get lots of money for, but we know and we're starting to see that you deliver a really consistent product all the time, people will pay more for it. Be interesting if this worked. There we are. So we've got the technology, as Rod said earlier, to move from a carcass-based grading system, which we've done. So we've graded traditionally on teeth for years and years, but I guess the issue with that is the customer doesn't care, to moving to a graded meal outcome and having a relationship with the consumer. And more than that, we've got to become experts in the industry of taking that consumer insight and consumer knowledge and really driving that back in our business using data. And Mick showed you before about EQ, and we've moved to the EQ cipher across our business because, again, it's going to be a while before that translates down into grids, yes, and that's because there are some customers still holding on to the old model. But we have to move to that eating quality description because the person that pays that money puts their hand in their pocket. They don't care how many teeth are in the cattle's head. And deliver that really consumer-friendly meal outcome. You go in, and I've always wondered why someone would, in today's day and age, go and buy chuck steak, for God's sake. It's the last thing anyone wants to buy. You've got to deliver them a customer very simply, and you hear this from the marketing gurus, They're not going to buy a piece of meat. They've got a job to do when they walk into that store, and they want some help from us as processors and guys as producers to get that job done. And you know what, if you help them get the job done every time, as I said earlier, they'll pay for it. And we've got to deliver that through company brands. And I was speaking at something in Sydney yesterday, and I put up a screen. I don't have it here, but that screen was just full of brands from our company. The best part about it was 5 years ago, none of them existed. That's how quickly things are changing. We're trying to redesign a branding system within our business that's really this simple, and that is that you have everything in the business graded on eating quality, recognising there's still good market for manufacturing product and value-adding product, be able to describe it as good every day, special and very special to a customer. And because we're talking about genetics today, I won't spend too long, but this is what we're doing in the business. We're trying to line up our grass-fed and our grain-fed brands, our Angus brand, into eating quality bands that make sense for consumers. And the technology and science is there at the moment. There's plenty of data collected, but I think as people are saying, we're just not putting that together in the way we want to at the moment. And value-based marketing is really, we can distill it how we like, but it's really this simple. It's a measure of quality or value, as a consumer says, and price is just a component of value. That's absolutely right. And how much of it's there. And a bit of an update, I mean, the DEXA machine is now working in Rockhampton. It'll be working well by beef. You can all come and have a look at it. Just don't tell the plant manager I invited everyone in this room. There's other camera technology coming in that we think we can start to train to do that. Those things will be producing meaningful outcomes by the end of this calendar year. On the MSA side, there's cameras at the moment where there's technology. There's some scientists in the US that are crunching some numbers for us at the moment. I took a whole bunch of measures, about 2,000 images late last year. I'm hoping by the middle of the year at a couple of our plants, the MSA grading will be done by a machine. So fixing up that first part of getting the data objective, we're getting there. And to us, the real key in this is, okay, we're going out around the world now. We're really pleased. The grasslands program that we started a few months ago, there's about 900 producers in it now. And it'd be a really good problem for us to have if that was 2,000, 3,000 in time. And we're building big markets for that MSA-graded grass-fed beef around the world. But how do I keep that promise to those customers around the world that they can have that same quality all the time? And the only way we think we can do that is give you guys much better information about what that customer wants and pay accordingly. Hence why we're starting with the objective measures, and then hopefully, and I'll show you in a minute, moving to a value-based payment system when it all starts to make sense. But here's here's the information's one thing. What do you do with it? And we're really hopeful that we can come together as an industry and build a genetic system around it that, yeah, we can. There are tools out there. You can take the information we give you, one, to build the tools, but then to use the tools on an ongoing basis. Because if we don't do that, the Indias, the Brazils are going to produce cheaper beef protein than we can every day. They just get up and they'll do that. The Americans will process it cheaper, and our friend chicken is about 25% of the price of us today. So, and I've used this quite a lot in future, this is what a value-based marketing payment grid might look like. Really simple, right? At least I can read that, I don't know, and it's not in 5 font. They're our, the premium, classic, selected and value add, they're our quality grades. And then simply the weight, and when we talk about weight, yeah, carcass weight at the moment, but you want to sort out how much meat, fat and bone is actually in that body and pay accordingly. Because the customer buys meat, right? We know that largely. And as Rod said earlier, the current system doesn't do that very well, but the point I'm trying to make is that's going to get fixed really quickly. So I guess that first part of the equation is that we'll have the data. So that's the future. The issue now is and we've used this slide for about the last 3 years because it makes a point, The issue now is we don't do anything like that. We pay on a grid, and that's that red line that you can see there, and we give you an average. But the reality is, and they're 6 different mobs, the actual value of those mobs, the individual animals in there, is vastly different. And you see it time and time again. No matter what the cattle visually look like, you see this time and time again. And this is some data that come out of our Narracourt plant, but the case can be made just about everywhere. And this is about 2 weeks of data, so it's all real. The variation in animals going into that plant, you can see in terms of value, there's, what's that, about $1,200 difference between the very best and the very worst, but you can see some of the averaging there. There's a huge opportunity for us if we can start to move that curve around as an industry. So if you're kind of asked in our simple world, what could genetics do? Well, if you're able to use the data and you had the tools on farm, and say we're able to get rid of the bottom 5 or the bottom 10% of those animals and redistribute it, there you go. Yeah. And look at the value at the top, in that top quartile there. Massive, right? You know, $208 a head better those now. If we could start to develop breeders and a breeding flock around that, imagine what's possible. There's a lot of work to do as an industry, but this is the kind of prize that's sitting there for us. And I guess if you're a lot less ambitious, but we could set some goals over time, right? It doesn't matter what the numbers actually are underneath that curve, just know they're big, right, as an industry. You start multiplying that out across our industry, that's huge dollars. Good point from the north, it's not just about quality and yield, you can build other parameters in there too about getting more productivity. That's what we should be focusing on as an industry. And now for the yes, but, and to follow on from some of the stuff Jason was saying. We'll have the data coming to make that step forward. And the industry's made a commitment to that. We're absolutely committed across our supply chain to have that objective data coming to everybody. Trying to do the same for our feeders as people know into our feedlots. But can we use that data to calculate breeding values? And will our suppliers who, you know, in the crossbred and the multi-breed world be able to make use of it? Because if they can't, there's a real disconnect. And I'm really keen for us to bridge that gap. And I guess we've got research to do, and we'd say in the future, standing up here, if it's about collecting data in meat plants, it's about needing people to do that. Well, we've got lots of good graduates in there that can do that for someone that wants to build these things. And we don't want to hold on to this data as a meat processor. Jason's absolutely right. There is zero value in holding on big pots of data. Right? It's about how it's used. And you look at the amount of money involved in this. He's right, if we don't solve this problem together, someone else will come and do it for us. Or I like the term, we use that inside too, to us. I guess I wish I'd seen Rod Polkinghorne's example, because as meat processors, we don't like to quote the ACCC too much, but this is a really good example to us because, again, you look at the dairy improvement since 1970 compared to beef, and the dairy industry as a whole, I mean, has done a whole bunch better. So what have they had differently? They've had the objective data coming from milk processors. We're fixing that as an industry, so we can't tick that box yet, but we can in the future. But what else do they have? Really good genetic tools. And I guess that's the box we'd really like to see filled in. And as I said, the main reason I've come along today is to say we'll do whatever we can to help us get to that point, because that's the part we think is really important to our own future, but it's a bit we can't do ourselves. So we need to work together as an industry. And I think we'll finish it there.